I think what would resonate and what has stayed the same is the sense of adventure. I would say hold your nerve and keep the faith. And I say that because I think so often we get scared, we get put off, we play it safe, we procrastinate, and do get nervous around doing things.
Hello grown-ups, and welcome to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up with me, Sam Cooper-Gray, your host. We are joined this week by Helen Gibson, MBE, and this week we learn from her about her beginnings of adulthood in East Yorkshire through to getting a job in the Cabinet Office and working in Westminster to writing her book. So please join me to welcome Helen to the podcast. So Helen, welcome to the podcast and thank you for being with us today. I'm going to kick us off with the question we always start with, which is tell us a little bit about your journey into adulthood.
Thanks, Sam, that's super. And I'll start, I guess, with turning 18. And I guess adulthood is different for all of us, isn't it, where we might draw that line. But I'll start it at 18 rather than 21. And at that point in sixth form, and very much thinking ahead in terms of what the future might look like for university, work. But at that 18-year-old adulthood turning point, very much around who my friends were, what I was doing in the sixth form, as well as obviously the academic side of things and looking to the future.
So where were you at school? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in East Yorkshire, so just outside of Hull, and it was I guess going back even before that, Mum and Dad met at Hull University, and to that extent stayed in the area, and went on in that case to onto school and sixth form in the local area.
So 18-year-old at school, doing your academics, doing your A-levels, I assume. So how did you pick where you went to university and where did you end up going and what did you do?
So I went to Durham University, and in terms of thinking about how that came about, it was really looking at different universities at the time, thinking about where my friends were going and where was going to be best in terms of what I felt would be that overall experience. So yes, good for the course that I did, but also very much that life that was going to go with it. And Durham in the northeast was a place that I thought, I could enjoy spending a few years here.
Excellent. And so went to Durham for university. And what did you do at Durham? What was your...
So I did sociology and psychology, which was brilliant, and learned a huge amount doing that. And that then led on to other things off the back of it. But a really good grounding, I think, in terms of society and psychology and what makes people tick, really.
So how did that degree and that topic and what you learned around kind of society and how people tick, how did that kind of frame what you did when you left university and went off and got your first job?
Well, I have to say there was a bit of a gap in between. So
okay, great.
Graduated, the priority at that point was not actually getting a job, but having some fun.
Excellent.
And I had a couple of years which were doing a number of different things, from travelling to working some holiday jobs. I did a ski season. I worked my way around Australia, and so that was great in terms of getting that broader education before then coming back home and thinking about getting a proper job.
So what was your first proper job then? So you'd done your travelling, you'd been off. I love ski season in Australia, 2 more extremes than you can get, I don't think, which is brilliant. Yeah. And then back home, and what was driving you then to kind of come back home and get, as we say, a proper job?
Yeah, and I then got into teaching and actually teaching A-level psychology, which I taught at several schools, and yeah, that was great. But then I started to get into thinking more strategically about education and actually what does the educational policy look like and the broader skills beyond the classroom. So after a couple of years of teaching, I got into a consultancy company which was exactly that in terms of that educational policy arena. So that was then a sort of change of direction, but using that educational experience to take it to that societal level.
And so a bit of a shift, as you say, but just taking through that education theme. How did you go from that kind of taking that leap out of education into consulting and then to what you do today? So kind of tell me a bit more about that journey.
Oh, and that's interesting, Sam, because I'd love to say it's been really carefully planned and engineered,
but it hasn't. I don't think anybody carefully plans their life like that, do they?
Well, some people I know have a very clear plan, and whereas for me, my approach has been very much one thing leads to another. And when you say what was the journey from education to what I'm doing now, and sort of international business that I've had in between, and right up to today in terms of some of the speaking I'm doing, some of the coaching and business advisory work, the journey is, absolutely one thing leads to another. And I tend to find that if you do a good job, then that leads to more invitations, more opportunities, and that's how I've built my journey. So it's been a really interesting one thing leading to another, but based on other people that I've met within any given situation, and then additional approaches, ideas, opportunities that have come at each step of the way off the back of that.
So really interesting how you went from working in consulting to the international business that you work on today and that you're probably most well known for. Kind of tell me what sparked that shift into the international space and how that came about.
Yeah, and just a couple of steps in between. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to do an MBA, which allowed me to get more into the business side of things, whereas previously I've been social science orientated. But that was very much to promote local females into the business environment. So that gave me my ticket in terms of the MBA. Off the back of that, I got a job at the Cabinet Office, and through working there, met all sorts of different consultancy companies, research companies, got an opportunity to then work at PA Consulting, which was working in their government practice, and that gave me exposure to all sorts of different clients and sectors, but within the government arena in its broadest sense. And at that point I felt I had sufficient stripes, if you like, and networks and experience to be able to get involved in our family business, which my dad had set up, and be able to get involved in that in a way which was with credibility in my own right, rather than just the boss's daughter.
This is what I love about interviewing people. So you ask them questions and they come out with these little nuggets that sound like a really normal thing that will be huge to the people who are listening. So what you've just said, the two things that jumped out to me is I did an MBA and then I ended up at the Cabinet Office. And then the second thing is you told us a little bit more about kind of, turning 18 and living, near Helen, growing up in East Yorkshire and going off to university, but completely didn't tell us that your dad runs his own business. So I'm going to take you back to both of those because I think they sound like quite formative things. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, how did you go from MBA to cabinet office? Because that's not what most people end up doing with an MBA. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and that's interesting, Sam. I guess off the back of the MBA, I was looking at what was interesting in terms of applying for jobs, and the cabinet office and being at the centre of government. Yes, whilst it's not businessy, it's still a business, and it really interested me. And I thought, I'd love to have an opportunity to work at the heart of government, and so applied, but then my role within that was very much a business role in terms of bringing in all sorts of businesses, as say, whether that's consultancy companies or others. And that was a great combination in terms of the double exposure, I guess, of both the business world, working with those contractors, but also being at the heart of government in terms of the civil service experience.
Yeah. And obviously gave you that experience and confidence, as you say, to then go back to kind of working with your dad and in the family business. So, tell me a little bit how that was. How was the transition to working with your dad, being the boss's daughter, but also, feeling like you've got the CV behind you now and the experience and the...
Yeah, absolutely. It was tough in terms of coming into that environment, and I started at the bottom very deliberately, and was really careful, not just me, but my dad and other members of the team in terms of my development and progression through, and probably worked harder than anybody. Really had to doubly earn it and doubly prove myself in that sense because of that family relationship. It certainly wasn't a soft landing in that sense, but it was at a time where, say, I was able to really bring some different skill sets, expertise, personality, when most of the team were older than me. Not all of them, but the majority were men, and men my dad's age. So I was coming into a different environment, but with something quite different to contribute, and that paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing I'm really interesting is you touched a little bit as well on the public speaking, and I know you do a lot of public speaking. I've heard you speak and you're absolutely brilliant. Tell me how you kind of taught yourself the skills of doing that, because it's not something I think that comes naturally to most of us. And I know I do some public speaking and it terrifies me every time I do it. So tell us a little bit about that, and kind of how did you get into doing public speaking? Kind of how do you prep yourself for that? Because I think that's quite a skill, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny what you say in terms of, I think it is something you either love or you hate. And I know a lot of people hate it. It's their worst nightmare in terms of standing up and speaking. Whereas for those of us that do love it, there is something amazing about being given a platform, being given an opportunity and an audience to be able to share a message and influence in a way which, to me, I absolutely love doing it. But it's about that. It comes back to that education for me in terms of being able to encourage people, able to inspire people, able to help in whatever that sphere might be.
Yeah.
And that's a quick way of getting out to a lot of people, and getting that those takeaways across. It's something I've always enjoyed, and that probably goes back to the teaching.
Yeah, of course.
But then obviously through my career I've developed that, and it's been one of the things that I've wanted to do more of, hence kind of getting myself into that position, getting registered with a number of speaking agencies. I've just done a TEDx this last weekend in Wales.
Amazing.
Again, takes it to another level, and I'd really encourage people to think about it and do not be scared of it, but to get more comfortable with speaking up and getting onto the stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's TEDx is on my wish list. I think I said that to you when you said that you were going to do it. That's on my wish list to do a TEDx. But I think what's really interesting is you clearly, well, I want to do more public speaking, so I'm going to start doing it. I want to give more back. Public speaking is a good way of doing it, and kind of have built yourself up with that, got yourself agents. And I think that shows a real tenacity of I'm trying to get to this place, and so I'm going to grow that as a proposition of how I do it and think about how to do it. And then obviously, the pinnacle is the TED talk, right? Always. But let me take you back to your 18-year-old self. So at college, studying, having fun, thinking about where to go for university. What would your 18-year-old self, if she could see you now, what would she recognise? What would really resonate with her about you now?
I think what would resonate and what has stayed the same is the sense of adventure. And that doesn't necessarily mean travelling to the other side of the world, although I do love to travel. But it's that curiosity and the having a mindset of life is short, life is an adventure, and having a story to tell at the end of it, of having spent our time and energy and talents well. So I've always had that, and that remains the same in terms of a driver, being adventure. I guess what is different now is the experience that I've got, and the sort of sense of responsibility, that on the one hand, yes, there's adventure, on the other hand, there's the responsibility to do as much good as we possibly can, to help others, to be an encouragement to others that are either younger than me or perhaps less experienced than me, and that sense of responsibility is quite different, I think, now.
Something your 18-year-old self wouldn't have really thought about.
Slightly more carefree at 18.
as we all were. And would she have expected you to join the family business? Is that something she'd have thought was something she would do, or was she determined to go off and do it all on her own?
So, I mean, obviously I was watching Dad and taking an interest, and it was something I had in the back of my mind that, possibly one day I could get involved in that. So yes, there was a part of me that had that seed sown, but it was never guaranteed or necessarily going to be the case, because you don't know where life is going to take you, and but it was an amazing experience, and to work with my dad in terms of that succession plan and being able to make that my own beyond Dad's input was very special. Yeah,
absolutely. We've touched on a number of different areas, and you've, as we've said, you've kind of had a number of different careers. You've had the teaching career, and then into consulting, going back into education, into government, and then, everything you've done since in some international, and then getting involved in the family business. Have you had times where you've kind of felt the pressure of failure, where things haven't quite gone the way you were expecting?
And I think, Sam, certainly for working internationally, one of the things I always say to people is expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think it's true for life in general, but certainly when you start adding in different time zones, different cultures, all of that is then magnified. And yeah, to that extent, it's right to expect the unexpected. In terms of dealing with failure and sort of coming back from that, I mean, every step of the way there's been something that's not gone right, or certainly not been easy, and that continues to this day. So I think it is very much around, and actually what I've not mentioned yet, but I've written a book which is all around
I love that. I just dropped that in. I haven't mentioned that. Like, I did all these other amazing things. I did an MBA and managed to get into the cabinet office. I'm now in the family business. Oh, and by the way, I haven't told you that I've also written a book. Okay, so tell us about the book.
So, and yeah, not to, sorry if that sounds, but I was just wanting to bring that up in relation to your question that you asked with failure and how we deal with that. And the topic of the book, well, the title is Go for Goosebumps, so very much to encourage ourselves to go for those exciting, slightly scary bits and to be bold. But the content is all around the topic of encouragement and how we can encourage ourselves and other people. And that is so important when it comes to the difficulties that we face, the failures that we are inevitably going to have, and how we find a way to not only keep going, but to continue to go for those goosebump moments in the face of a failure or uncertainty or life's porridge.
Love that. Life's porridge. I think that life's porridge might end up being one of the reels, because I love that. I think life's porridge is brilliant. As is Go for the Goosebumps. So I think we've definitely got some good snippets already. So we all get to make lots of decisions. You've obviously made lots of decisions over your life that have impacted where you've ended up. What's the best decision you've ever made?
What's the best decision I've ever made? Oh, that's a difficult one. I mean, I've made some great decisions. I think one of the best decisions was to decide to stop what I was doing in terms of the education and go back home and do the MBA, which redirected me beyond that. But that was quite a pivotal decision in terms of actually stopping work, going back to live with mum and dad, and getting into education again, and all that took in terms of the investment. But that was a platform to redirect more into the business world.
And again, very much on the theme then of giving you goosebumps. That's that must have been quite a scary thing to do, right? To leave a career, you're earning money, to go back and, after you've already built your career, to then go back and kind of start again, but with the experience you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we're never starting from scratch. And I do believe that there are several times in life where you do have to stop, redirect, reinvest. If we don't do that, then, I mean, it's very easy, isn't it, to just keep going, doing the same things that we've always done. But as I said earlier on, time is short. And when we look back on our lives, are we going to be pleased with how we've spent that time and our efforts and our energy? And I think it's right to pause and to pivot and to make some of those difficult decisions when the timing is right.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's definitely the braver thing to do, to take a new fork in a road, right? Rather than just carrying on doing what you're doing, because you're going into the unknown rather than the known, even if you hope that unknown is better.
And And yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And of course, there's no guarantee that
No.
the new direction will be
Yep.
better. But we go into that armed with everything that's gone before us. And therefore, the clever thing is to use that and cream it off
Yeah.
in the best possible way to reframe the next move, whatever that looks
Yeah.
like. And that's the exciting thing. or to me, that's where the excitement is and where the adventure is, because there are so many things that we could do, and there is so much need in the world for our values, our
Yep.
everything that we can possibly contribute to the world. And what a shame if you only do one thing, or
Yep.
so chapters.
Oh, yep. I like that. Excellent. So next, I want to ask you about advice. So we all get given advice. We all give advice. What's the best piece of advice you've been given that you completely ignored?
That I've completely ignored. I and it's not a single thing, but it's more of a sentiment in terms of so often, especially growing up, you get told to be careful. uh, all the time. Oh, be careful. But actually, and of course, there's a time to be careful and very sensible. But there's also a time to take a risk and a managed risk, and it is often in those arenas that you get the best possible times and experiences. And so I think, not to say that I haven't been careful, because I have, but to take that carefulness with a pinch of salt, and have the confidence and the faith in terms of holding one's nerve and keeping the faith when it is pretty difficult at times, that things will be okay in the end.
I love that, and I think that's kind of threaded through. You ignoring that advice and taking it with a pinch of salt kind of threads through everything we've talked about, because your sense of adventure from an early age has clearly come through, that you wanted to go off and do something different. You went, after university, you went off and travelled, and then you pivoted to a new career and education, and then you've pivoted into the family business and, getting yourself up on stage and then writing a book. I think, that's really interesting, because listening to your story, you can see that don't let the be careful stop you doing stuff is clearly a theme within your life. We also like to ask
actually, there's a brilliant book which influenced me on that, called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which I'm sure you've come across. But that I read at a very, very young age, and I love that.
Clearly quite pivotal for you, clearly.
Yeah.
So we like to ask everybody who comes on the podcast to set a personal challenge for our listeners. So if you could set a personal challenge for our listeners, what would it be?
And that's easy for me because it's the title of my book, which is Go for Goosebumps. And I would encourage everybody to think about, well, what is it that gives you those goosebump moments, the scary bits, the exciting bits, and to really push for those, and go for the goosebump moments, and see what a difference that makes to life, and the
Brilliant.
time that we've got.
Yeah, absolutely. And somehow we've got to the end. We've got to the last question. I'm not sure how. And it's been lovely learning about your journey and your story as you've kind of pivoted through life from, going to university, going off and going travelling to your book and your TED talk. So the last question I ask everybody is, if the book existed that was the beginner's guide to being a grown up, what's the one piece of advice that you would put in there?
I would say hold your nerve and keep the faith. And I say that because I think so often we get scared, we get put off, we play it safe, we procrastinate, and do get nervous around doing things. But yeah, hold your nerve, keep the faith, go for goosebumps, see what happens.
Amazing. And I'm not sure I can follow that. So we're gonna finish there for today, Helen, because I think that is the best way to end the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed it, and I know listeners will have enjoyed it as well.
Thank you so much, Sam. Really appreciate it. Great to talk to you, and see you soon.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. Please do like, follow and subscribe wherever you listen or watch. Next week, we welcome Claire Parkinson to the podcast from Australia. From her beginnings in the UK and getting pregnant at 16 to joining the prison service in her 20s to, again, we've got another author with us, to her writing her book, Shitty Grit, in her 40s. So looking forward to next week. And in the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.